Um, so first of all, welcome to you. I hope you've had good days. Um, what I'm going to be doing is, first of all, introducing you to Laura. Laura Neal is one of our brilliant Year 3 students who is acting as one of our School of Education ambassadors for today. So she's going to be supporting me to talk to you. And hopefully, if you've got questions that you don't want to ask me, because I'm the boring tutor, but you'd like to talk to a real life student, there's Laura. She's put a camera on because she's feeling brave. If you want to talk to a real student rather than me who makes it up, then Laura will be really happy to talk to you and answer any questions. I suppose the most important thing is to give you an idea of what we're doing and why we're doing this. We know that we have open days, and we've got one coming up on Saturday, and I'll be telling you about that towards the end of the talk. But sometimes people want a little bit more information about what kind of course it is, not necessarily what you do on the course, but what is it all about? Why on earth should I consider even going into education? So I want to kind of give you that insight, really. I should just say I'm Helen Childerhouse. I'm the programme leader for the BA in Education, and I wrote the course a few years ago. We're now in our third year of delivering it, so Laura will be one of our first students to graduate with a degree in education. And you did the BSc in Education and Psychology, didn't you, Laura?
So I'm doing psychology as well.
Yeah, because you're super brainy. So it would be really, useful for us to just give you that insight. So I'm going to talk about both programs. They both fundamentally have the same principles behind them, the same reasons and the same sort of things that we focus on in terms of the way we look at education. But I've also got to ask you to be a little bit brave. You don't need to turn your cameras on, but I'm really hoping that you'll be brave enough to type some comments in the chat stream as we're going through. I've got a few things for you to think about. But first of all, I'm just going to share my slides with you so you can see what I am talking about. So hopefully, Laura, can you give me a shout if you can see this okay?
Yep, it all looks fine.
Ah, brilliant, it does work. Whew, that's always a relief. Okay, so this is, as I said, the student showcase event. And the first thing that I'm going to sort of ask you is, are you interested in the field of education? My background is that when I was at school, I was in sixth form, and I did the most bizarre A-levels. I did cooking. I did home economics because I really love cooking. I did English, and my teachers told me that I wasn't very clever and that I shouldn't get too excited about going into academic studies, and certainly not to go to university. So I did office practice and shorthand and typing and all those kinds of things. And then I started working in an office, and I just thought, this is wrong. This is not me. I've always loved working with children. I did my school experiences in a primary school. And so a little bit late in the day, kind of, I was 20 when I went to uni, and I did a degree in education, just like you're, thinking about doing. And then I became a primary school teacher, and I did that for 18 years. So I supported an awful lot of children in primary schools between the ages of 3 and 11. And while I was doing that, we were getting lots of students coming in doing their teacher training in our schools. And I really loved supporting people to learn more about education and to become future teachers. And so what I did was kind of move sideways. Rather than being promoted in schools and becoming a head teacher, I decided to go into higher education. And so since 2007, I've been a lecturer and senior lecturer in education, both at Sheffield Hallam University, at Bishop Grosseteste University on the other side of Lincoln, and now I'm full-time at the University of Lincoln. and I'm involved in the undergrad education programs. I also do the postgraduate certificate in education teacher training program, and I now work with people who are doing research in education. So I kind of do a bit of everything. But at the end of the day, for me, my absolute love and will always be my passion is education. All that teaching and learning stuff is it just excites me. I think it's really, really great. So I've chosen some photographs that I've put on this slide for you to look at and have a think about. The standard picture that you expect to see of an adult with young learners. We've got the owl with their mortarboard on, the clever person. We've got a cartoon with a group of children on it who come from all different backgrounds and have different experiences. Perhaps some of those children have special educational needs or disabilities. We've got the most gorgeous photograph in this one in the bottom in the middle of children. I think the little girl in the red coat is pulling a scary face, but they're obviously perhaps on a school trip. They're going for a walk around. It looks like they're outside of the classroom and outside of the playground. But then we've got some other photographs that might surprise you. We've got a photograph of the Natural History Museum in London, one of the library, and then one of some children doing some kind of physical exercise. And I happen to know that that photograph was taken at an outdoor pursuit centre. And my question really is, this education thing, it doesn't have to happen in a classroom. It can happen anywhere where we learn something new, where our understanding and our knowledge grows a little bit as a result of our experiences. And that really is the bottom line of what I believe this education degree to be about. It's not just about children learning in a classroom. It's about learning in all different places and sort of moving on and taking our experiences with us to inform what we do and what we know tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. So I suppose the question is, what is an educator? As I said, you don't have to be a school teacher to educate learners. Somebody who wants to know something, somebody who can go and ask a more knowledgeable person a question and get an answer is learning, and that person giving the answer is the educator. And that might be what you're thinking about. You might decide that you would like to work with people. Perhaps if it's a school trip to a museum or a school trip to an outdoor pursuit centre or wherever, you might not be sure about going into a classroom, but you might decide that working with young people is what you're really interested in. So what I want you to do first of all is, I'm going to stop talking because I'll get new nerves. I want you to be brave and to have a go at typing in the chat stream. A little sort of, a bit of an overview really. I want you to think of a teacher or an educator, it doesn't have to be in school, who you really liked and who you responded well to. What was it about them that helped you learn? Why did you like them? Now, I don't want you to give me any names. This is all confidential. Just, tell me. Give me a bit of an indication of a teacher that you loved or still love, and why do you think they helped you learn? So I'll just be quiet for a couple of minutes while you have a think and then start putting your ideas in the chat stream. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for joining in. I'm really relieved because sometimes with our students, year 1, year 2 and year 3 students, sometimes I'll say, right, write something in the chat stream, and they don't. And I'm like, come on, tell me something. You have to really sort of prod them sometimes to get them to talk. So thank you. You make me feel much less lonely. I think there's some really good examples coming up. those teachers who are prepared to just go that little extra mile to help you out when you tell them that you're struggling. People who you can talk to, people who listen to you. I think the very best educators are the ones who help us to feel important and to help us feel needed. And that's what we strive to be, or that's what most educators strive to be. It's just feeling comfortable with somebody. So I suppose the first thing that we can gather from all of this is that it might not be how clever that teacher is, but it might be how approachable teacher or educator is. And already you can start to think about, how approachable am I? Do people like to come and talk to me? Do they like to be with me? I'm sure that, you've all had experiences where you've been with younger children. Even if it's only in, an aisle in Tesco's or Sainsbury's or wherever you go shopping, and you see somebody helping to push the trolley, or a little person, who's sort of waiting in the queue or something. Do you feel drawn to them? Do you feel like, you smile at them and sometimes have a little chat with them? They're the sorts of educators that we really love because they make us feel important. Now, one that's not quite so good. Can you think of an educator or a teacher who you didn't like? Somebody who, you didn't warm to? And why did you feel like that about them? And did it impact, and did it have a, sort of an influence on your learning? So I'll be quiet again, and we'll see what you come up with for this one. Thanks ever so much. Some really good answers. What is interesting is, the words enthusiastic and encouraging seem to have come up more than once. If somebody encourages you and feels like they care about how well you do and are interested in you and want to help you be what you want to be, then we respond much more positively to them. So I'm just really glad that, I haven't had some of your teachers by the sound of it, because it can really impact on your ability to learn. And that's, something that we think about on our program. So I'll just move on to the next program. Right, the next slide. So in terms of the BA Honours Education, and I will also mention the BSc Education and Psychology, we wanted to come up with a program that was for people who want to be primary school teachers. And I know, just looking at the aspirations and the intentions of our current year 3, about 70% of those students will probably go on to do teaching, usually primary school teaching or teaching in special needs settings. The standard dream to be a class teacher is very, very common on both of our BA and BSc programs. We've got many of our students who are currently frantically writing their UCAS application forms to be able to go on and do a PGCE. But we also have students who are thinking about doing other routes. So I spoke to one of our students a couple of days ago who would really like to work in a museum. And what they're thinking about doing is being the education specialist within the museum who receives and supports children who go there on school trips. So if you think back to the old days when you were in primary school, or even currently, it's quite common to go on school trips and to go and visit different places. And usually when you arrive at those places, there is somebody who welcomes you. And this particular student I'm thinking of wants to be the person who welcomes and who provides different sorts of experiences for children on their school visits. And the same goes for libraries as well. We want children to visit other places, to get out of their classrooms sometimes. And libraries are very common places where children are taken to visit. I mentioned earlier the Outdoor Pursuit Centre. I have worked with a student in the past who didn't want to go into school as a formal school teacher, but who had a really good friend who was helping to run an outdoor pursuit centre. In fact, it was one of the PGL centres in the Midlands. And this PGL centre, you know, children arrive on their school trips, they all get off the coach and they stay over for 1, 2 or 3 nights. And they do things like going on zip wires and campfires and, you know, walking through the woods and what have you. And what he wants to do is to be the education person who supports children to visit those kinds of places. I've got a student who is thinking about working in prisons. And that really took me back because I hadn't thought of that when I first started to write the programme. But she tells me that, you know, some people who are currently in prison feel that the reason why they're there is because they didn't manage to succeed or feel comfortable in their school settings when they were younger. And as a result of that, their English and math skills are not very good. And so this particular student is wanting to provide those maths and English classes to support offenders who want to go, you know, and leave prison when their time is done, and to be able to turn their lives around. And I just think that's such an exciting and admirable thing to want to do. So, you know, that's also a possibility. And maybe, you know, the undergraduate degree, the BA or the BSc in education and psychology might not be the end for you. At the moment, you know, you're probably in schools or sixth form colleges and thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I want to get this over and done with. I can't imagine years and years more of being in schools or being in classes. But actually, some of our students have said, as soon as I get my degree, I want to go on and do a master's. So we've got students who want to go on and do research in education, students who are really keen to be able to go and learn more about psychology and education. Some students are thinking about going on into teaching in higher education. So not just working with young people, but getting their masters, even their PhDs, which I know seems like forever away for you. But time will turn really quickly, and you might one day be the person saying, I'd like to get a doctorate in an area of education, and I'd like to be somebody who teaches in higher education. So no matter where you go, if you can find learners, groups of learners, then they're looking for people to educate. You might be keen on working in nursery settings with very young children. You might be the person who wants to work in an environment where you train other people. So perhaps a trainer in retail, or it could be absolutely anywhere. If you have an understanding of how people learn and how teaching can be done, then there are many, many places and types of jobs out there for you. Okay, so I've talked quite a bit about how this is more than just a pre-teach training program. This is not just the sort of undergraduate program that you do to go on and become a class teacher. And I'm going to try and explain how we do that, how we give you that really broad understanding of education. rather than just focus specifically on a classroom type of provision. So when we think about education, we know that there are 4 different ways of looking at it. So we call them lenses, you know, a lens that you look through to help you make sense of something. I've got, you know, this photo of this child with a pair of binoculars. You know, what do you look through when you study education? Well, we've called them the 4 pillars of education because it's the 4 pillars that hold up the actual thing that education is. And those 4 pillars focus on history, philosophy, sociology, and psychology. So in terms of history, we know that classrooms, how classrooms look now are very, very different to how they used to be 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago. We know that the curriculum was very different. Believe it or not, it was only in 1989, 1990 that a formal curriculum was actually introduced into schools. I just completed my teacher training, so you can work out how old I am. And, you know, I had to go and collect 14 files, each one for a different subject area. And that told us what we were going to teach to each age group and the type of content that we had to deliver. But before that, it used to be, you know, very different. I used to plan topics. So we might have topics such as homes, you know, where we live or something. And then we'd do English and maths and science and geography and history. And all those individual subjects were through the topic of homes or houses. So things have changed quite recently, really. Certainly in my working lifetime. Pupils have changed. It used to be a long time ago, only the rich, the wealthy, and the capable who were allowed to go to school. You had to be born into money and, you know, sort of have finances behind you from your family to be able to access education. Children who did not have that kind of background were sent to work. And we know that, you know, children as young as 5, 7, whatever, used to work long, long hours to bring a wage into the home. So school was an absolute luxury that they couldn't afford. Teachers were different. You know, and the policy, the expectations of what teachers do, it's changed so much now. And when we look at education and we look at the history of education, we can ask some really deep questions about, well, why did we do it like that? Why has it changed? How has it changed? And what can we learn from what used to happen in the past to improve what we do today? How can we learn from our mistakes and not repeat them? How can we spot all those brilliant things that we've done in the past and try repeating them or using them again and again because we know that they work? So that's one way of looking at education. Another thing that we do is think about the philosophy of education. That sounds really grand, but actually, if I just talk you through these 2 examples of philosophies of education, you can start to see how it might change what we do when we're educating. So John Locke, a philosopher, he said that when babies are born, their brains are absolutely empty. They have nothing in them whatsoever. And it's the teacher's job to fill those brains up, to make them clever, to give them all the knowledge that they need for the rest of their lives. Now that's okay, but who decides what knowledge needs to go in that brain? how do we know that their brains are really empty? Carl Jung totally disagreed with John Locke. And he said, hang on a minute, this thing that Locke's talking about is, in posh terms, it's called a tabula rasa, a blank slate. It can't be blank slates. There's got to be something going on in their brains, because when babies are born, they communicate. If you look at a film clip of a tiny baby, within minutes of it being born, it starts to identify, the parent, the main caregiver. You've seen clips of mum or dad sticking their tongue out and the baby mimicking it. Well, there has to be something in the brain to enable a baby to respond like that. Babies, we know, can, they'll cry if they're hungry and then be pacified when they're fed. And the question that Carl Jung asked is, are they doing that purely out of instinct, or are they able to use their experiences and their brains to be able to get the attention that they need? So you can see there's two very different arguments here. If we draw on the psychology element as well, and the recent discoveries of how the brain works, and even the discoveries of how babies react while they're still in the womb, we can begin to be pretty darn sure that stuff is happening. That brain is not completely empty when the baby's born. It is not a tabula rasa. So that means that we have to think about how we teach. It's more than just delivering information off a curriculum sheet and filling everybody's heads up. It's about looking at these people, these learners, and working out what they know already, what they don't know, what gaps we need to fill in to help them with their understanding and knowledge, and being really careful and clever about how we provide the information and the knowledge that they need. We build on people's experiences. And so just those two really fairly simple examples of philosophy can have a massive change on what education is and how we do it. Okay, this is kind of my field. I love this one. Sociology of education. We don't live in dark boxes all alone, and we mix with human beings every single day of our life. We see people, we sit with people. Okay, we might be slightly socially distanced at the moment, but I'm not going there. But we live in a social environment, and all the things around us influence who we are and what we know and how we learn. Your primary educators will have been your carers, might be your parents, it might be your early teachers, it might be grandparents, aunties, uncles, your siblings. You learn a lot from the people around you. And if we acknowledge them, we understand that teachers are not the only people who educate, but our parents too. And we can start to understand everybody's development is a little bit different. The way my mum and brought me up will be very different to the way your mums and dads might be bringing you up. The experiences that you have, your teachers that you liked and that you didn't like, will influence your relationships with other teachers in the future. And that changes the way that we shape our education system. I've been working with my students. I teach a year 3 module called Contemporary Issues. And at the moment, we're thinking about how there's sometimes a gap in terms of achievement and knowledge between some students and others. And I asked my students to imagine a learner who perhaps isn't doing as well as other students, and to think about that social aspect of their lives and why it might be. So if we were really simplistic, we'd say, yeah, that person isn't learning very well because they're just not very bright. Actually, my students brilliantly this week started to say, hang on a minute, if we look at their backgrounds, if we look at where they live, what their houses are like, what type of friends they have, what type of education their parents had, what type of teachers they've got, that's going to have an impact as well. It's not just about the brain, it's about all things related to how we live. So that sociology of education is also really important. And then we've got psychology of education. I will never profess to be an expert in this area. My colleague, Carol Callanan, who is the programme leader for the BSc in Education and Psychology, I look to her. She's amazing. She knows this stuff better than I could ever do. She is a psychologist, and she's got that understanding. But what she has taught me and what I have understood from her is that, yeah, the sociology is important. Those social experience is important. The philosophy is, the history is, but actually we can put into that psychology as well. That's knowing who we are, knowing how we think, how we learn, understanding how important memory is, our emotions, our personalities, our motivations. What is it about the human being that motivates them to do one thing more than another? How can we develop those motivational experiences to enhance learning and to enhance the education that we access? And what can we do when things don't seem to be normal? And I'm being really careful with that word normal, because I don't believe normal exists. We're all individuals, we're all originals, we are all different to each other. But sometimes there may be an aspect of development from birth or later in life that isn't typical. It isn't what we would expect of somebody at that age, perhaps. It might be a child who at the age of 4 still isn't able to walk or move about, or still isn't able to communicate effectively, either by language or emotionally. We might consider those atypical because they don't quite meet the age expected progresses. And understanding that can help us shape our teaching, our educating, and therefore the learning for other people. So that psychology has a massive impact. Okay, so I'm just going to stop there because I've just talked at you for ages. Your ears must be really getting bored now. What I'd like you to do is to think about one aspect of your learning. It might be an element of psychology. Have you learned something where you know that psychology has come into it? Perhaps motivation, perhaps emotion, perhaps your memory. Have you used that? Or maybe you might be able to think of a social aspect of learning, or perhaps you could think about sort of a prior learning experience that you've had that might fit with one of these lenses. And I'm just hoping that you can take a couple of minutes to type in the chat stream one example and which one it was. Was it psychology? Was it philosophy? Was it sociology? And perhaps it's a relationship you had with somebody. Perhaps it's somebody in your family who's taught you something that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't had that relationship with them. So just think of one and put it in the chat box. I'm so interested in how people learn. This is me being nosy, but it's also a way to get you to marry up an experience with a particular aspect or a lens I'm talking about. I am just so delighted to see that you're engaging with us and that you're talking to us. Thank you ever so much for that. I've nearly finished. I know you must be getting fed up now because I've been talking such a lot. I just want to say that in terms of looking at education, whichever lens, whichever approach that we're using, we will be looking at education around the world. It's not just about what happens in this country. So we have that global perspective, how people learn all around the world and the different types of education systems that different learners have available to them. And we can learn an awful lot from the people in other countries and around the world. So that will always underpin an awful lot of the learning that you do if you do either of these courses. It's really about shaping education for tomorrow. I can't even begin to imagine what the world will look like in 2050. In fact, when I think back to when I first qualified as a teacher, I didn't even see a world that we have now. I would never have imagined I would be able to deliver a class to people who are hundreds of miles away, all around the country. In fact, sometimes even around the world, because computers didn't exist then, mobile phones didn't exist then, and some of the jobs that children I taught, 30 years ago, didn't even exist. So the computer programmers, that are really quite common now, it didn't exist then because we didn't have that kind of technology. And I can only guess that, the world will continue to change really quickly. So whoever we are, whatever we're educating, we need to be thinking about having a good understanding of the breadth of skills that we need and the breadth of knowledge and understanding, so we can prepare learners for whatever is thrown at them in the future. I've just got 3 videos and they only last a couple of minutes each, but I really love them. I think they're great. They're 3 very different examples of educating. And just to give you an idea, if you come and do either a BA or BSc Ed and Psych programs with us at the Uni of Lincoln, we use videos like this quite a lot to help us make sense of the world and to make sense of education. And I just wanted to give you a feel of what it might be like if you were in one of our seminars, for example. So I've got a clip. I probably won't play it all. It lasts a few minutes. But as you're watching it, I want you to have a go at writing in the chat stream the sorts of skills that you can see these children displaying. And to just have a think, would a typical classroom environment like the ones you're used to be appropriate for these young people? I'm really hoping this will work. I just need to stop sharing this screen and share a different one. Cross your fingers that this works. Okay. Okay, so I'm hoping that you could see that. Just give me a quick yes in the message box if you were able to see that video. It suddenly went very quiet and I started to panic that nobody could see what on earth I was doing.
I could see it when there was no sound.
There was no sound. No, you didn't need any sound. It's fine.
Okay.
No, you didn't need to be able to hear it at all. It's just
Yeah,
watching.
I know it was just music for that one.
Basically, what do you make of these young people? I think they're quite amazing. And actually, I'm starving just watching them prepare that fried rice. What kind of skills do you think those young people are demonstrating? That's a really cool word, Clara. I didn't know paradoxy was a word. My screen went paradoxy. It's the infinity screen. It's because I wasn't sharing the actual video. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I really want to say is that there are so many occasions in our world, if you like, where learning happens even though it's not in a classroom, and those skills that that young child is developing and has learnt will stay with that child for the rest of their life. What I loved was when he went to get the bowl of, I don't know, chicken or whatever it was, without even thinking, he stopped and gave, I'm guessing, his young brother or a friend, he gave him a bit. And the other one knew to sit and watch and, and was learning as well. So you don't have to be a grown-up to be an educator. I just find that such an exciting insight into what education can really be. Laura, I'm just reading about your cooking skills. Remind me not to come to yours for dinner. I do not want.
I'm great at baking now. It's just when I was little, I was banned from cracking the eggs.
There you see, I would let you, come and cook for me. I think I trust you now. I think you've learned enough from your gran. Okay, so there are other videos, and if you would like to receive these slides, I'm running out of time because I talk too much. But if you are interested in getting the links to these slides, and if you just like copies of the slides, I'm really happy to share them with you. All you need to do is to contact me. So what I'm going to do is just type my email address into the chat stream. So if you want to watch more videos, or if you'd like a set of the slides, all you need to do is email me, and I can send them back to you attached to an email. But the other videos, one is of early education in Japan, and then the last one is a classroom lesson taken from the UK. And what I would ask you to do if you get a chance and you do watch these is to think about how different the education is, how it's just incredibly broad. It's not just about, being a grown-up teaching young people how to learn things. So, what about you? What are you thinking about doing? What is it that you want to do in the future? The world is your oyster. Whether you choose to do education or something else, it has to feel right for you. Where have you come from? Where are you going? What would you like to do? So have a think about you. Have a think about what you want to do, and feel free to chat to me after I finish this presentation. You can write it in the stream if you want to talk about it some more. But, perhaps education might just give you a way in. If you want to know more about the programs, then of course, you can go on to our education sites on the website, and I'll just share the last couple of slides with you, because on the slides we've got the links to the BA Honours in Education and also the BSc Honours in Education and Psychology. And then, of course, if you want to know more about the course, the types of assessments that we do, how we deliver, what the seminars are like, what the lectures are like, then you are very, very welcome to come and join us at one of the open days. I know we've got one coming up this Saturday because I'm going to be there together with Carol and the other programme lead. And if you want to find out more and you want to sign up for them if you haven't already, then the link to that is on this slide. But at the end of the day, I just want you to feel as if the course that you choose is something that you feel informed about. And that's been the whole point of why I've done this. I'm going to be quiet. You're fed up of listening to me. I'm just going to hand over to Laura, really, because you live it. You're living the dream, Laura, I hope. Is there anything that you'd like to share with our students or talk to our students about? And, future students who are out there listening to us, have you got any questions for Laura? You can turn your mic on and ask, or you can put your questions in the chat stream. We're happy with whichever you feel most comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Send me your questions. Like, what do you want to know from a student's perspective? I can answer anything, about students' attitude towards the course. Any questions about accommodation, life in Lincoln in general. Absolutely, let me know what you want to know. If you can't think of anything now, or you don't feel brave enough to put it in the chat, I've just popped my student email in there if you want to send me a message, or if you have a Unibuddy profile, I am on Unibuddy as well, so feel free to send me a message on there. But if you do think of anything now, I would love to hear your questions. But my attitude in general to the course. Oh, a question. Okay. In psychology, but the education course, what do you learn? Sarah, that's an excellent question. So in terms of first year, core modules that I did included BBC, which stands for Brain, Behaviour and Cognition. It's got a big focus on kind of neurobiology and the neuropsychology side of things. So it's got a lot of brain structure, and we cover topics like memory, different ways that we measure the brain, like MRI machines, EEGs, ECGs, all those kind of ways that we have a look at what signals the brain is sending. And then our other module was developing individual in society. So the whole kind of idea of that module was how we get from a baby who kind of specifically knows like nothing really up to a fully functioning adult. Like how do we learn how to function as a human being, really? Which both are really good modules. Going into second year, oh, that's testing my memory now. I can't remember what we did. So one module we did, which I loved, was developmental psychology. I found that absolutely fascinating, particularly so it's focusing on child psychology, how children interact with the environment, how they develop. We did in terms of play, which I feel like links with education really well, and that's what's so great about the modules that we do in psychology. They link really well with the education side. And now going into third year, I was able to pick some electives this, so I've gone for developmental psychopathology, which is kind of so developmental psychology, all the ways that development should go, developmental psychopathology, all the ways that it might go a bit wrong. So we're covering topics like anxiety disorder, developmental coordination disorder. We've got lectures coming up on autism, things like that. And then my other elective is one specifically on autism as well, which again links very well to education if you're thinking of going into special needs education and stuff like that. Is there anything else? Oh, you're very welcome, Sarah.
Okay, so just give you a couple of minutes really to think about any other questions you might have. It's worth saying you've got both Laura and my email addresses on this chat stream. If you think of something after the session's over and you really wish you'd asked it, you can email either of us and we'd be really happy to answer you. It's really hard sometimes to think of questions in the heat of the moment, especially when we kind of spring it on you. So, you know, the door is open kind of thing. You can always contact us. And if you want to have a much more personal chat and, you know, you feel an email might not quite enable you to be able to talk about your worries or your questions, if you do email us, then we can contact you back and set up an online meeting. So we use Teams and all, you know, Skype, all sorts of different approaches. WhatsApp, you know, that they're all out there. You know, you can ask us, you know, do you mind getting in touch with me? I'd like to have a chat with you. And we'll be really happy to do that too. So, and don't feel that we're not approachable, because we definitely are. Laura, can I put you on the spot? She's
Sure.
like, yeah, go on then. So was there anything that surprised you or anything that you found really, really interesting when you came to uni? Were there any bits of coming to uni that made you go, oh my God, I didn't realise it would be like that, or I'm really glad it is like that?
That's a really good question.
Sorry, that was horrible. I sprung it on you a bit. I'm just curious from a tutor's perspective.
Yeah.
Because your lives are very different to ours.
I think the picture I had of university going into it was kind of, you know, when you picture the massive lecture halls with hundreds of students and the big screens at the front and a lecturer kind of pacing up and down and talking, which is kind of what some of the bigger psychology lectures are like. But so something that did surprise me about the education side was because we're quite a small school, we kind of, even the lectures kind of have a bit of a seminar feel because the groups are smaller, and there's a lot more discussion and debate than I was expecting, which took me by surprise a bit at first, because it's a bit like, oh, I don't know these people and I've got to speak, I don't like that. But you actually get to know each other very quickly, and by the end of it, it feels very easy and very natural when you're all talking to each other. And that's something, yeah, it definitely took me by surprise at first, but now something I've learned to really appreciate, because it is really interesting hearing other people's perspectives, especially when you've got to write an assignment at the end, because you sit there and think, oh, I hadn't thought of looking at it like that, and that would be really good to put in this section, and stuff like that. And you all help each other, and it's yeah, it's got a really nice community feel to it. It's lovely.
That's really interesting. Just to give everybody an idea, in terms of the education side of things, what happens is if you do education and psychology, you access half of the education modules and, well, probably 2/3 of the education modules and 1/3 of psychology modules. If you do education, then you're purely in the School of Education and you just do those modules. Or subjects, basically a better word than modules at the moment. In psychology, as Laura said, there can be like 300 students all studying, all in the same lectures. And so you are just one person amongst hundreds of people. In the School of Education, just to give you a bit of an idea, we've got, I'm just thinking, in the first year, we've got 50 students. In the second year, we've got just under 60, and then in the third year we're about 40, aren't we, in the third year, with psychology and education psychology and education students together. So our numbers are really quite small, and we've done that on purpose. We wanted it to feel very personal and to feel like a close-knit community, rather than you feeling like, you know, you're just one in a huge number. We think our discussions are really in-depth and really helpful. But at the same time, it means that we can provide that pastoral support. So we're not just interested in your brain, we're interested in the whole of you. And that goes back to that sociology of education, you know, who we are, and our experiences and our surroundings influence how we learn. So yeah, if you're doing ed and psych, then you're going to get two very different experiences. But, you know, that's all to the good. You know, it helps you grow as learners. I've got no more questions. I don't want to have those horrible tumbleweed moments where it's really quiet and nobody dares speak. I obviously, you know, it's Tuesday night and it's definitely dinner time. So if you want to go and, you know, sort of have a think and come back with questions later, you can email us. If you've just had enough of hearing me rattle on, then please do feel free to turn me off. And we're here if you need us. So have a really good evening, everybody. I hope the rest of the week goes well. And it's been so lovely to have you in the room with us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for coming, guys.